things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. She's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner, is it in her? Is this real? Just illusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. I'm lost in wonderland of confusion. Is this real or just illusion? Manifestation or a dark delusion? Is this real or just illusion? I'm lost in a wonderland of confusion.
Don't you wish that your weekend was longer than just 2 days? Well, if so, then you're in luck, because here on Ripon Common Sense Radio, our weekend begins on Wednesday. Yes, you heard that right. Our weekend kicks off every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with Dark Wolf's Den, starring yours truly, Jerry the Dark Wolf. But that's where the fun has only just begun. Make sure you come back every Thursday through Sunday at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, for the Ripon Rabbit Hole live show, starring AJ the Ripon Rabbit. He dives into the archives of vocal legend Art Bell and brings those stories up to date. So make sure that you spend your extended weekends with the Animals Radio, Jerry the Dark Wolf and AJ the Ripon Rabbit, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, every Wednesday through Sunday, right here on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Ripon Rabbit Hole is a community-driven radio. At times the community comments may reveal prejudices and other beliefs that we or our sponsors do not condone. Views or opinions expressed by the community, callers, or guests are those of the individual speaking and do not represent the views or opinions of this site. Ripon Common Sense content is intended for mature audiences only. Enjoy.
This is Cynthia Sue Larson with Reality Shifters and the International Mandela Effect Conference, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den Show on Ripon Common Sense Radio.
Now the ultimate power in the universe.
This is your man Meta, aka Propagate This Light, and you're now listening to Dark Wolf's Den.
Are ghosts real?
We had 1,000 hours of continuous communication with the spirit world.
Does time travel actually exist?
The laws of physics seem to be compatible with time machines.
You know, sometimes I wonder about reincarnation. Don't you?
A 4-year-old boy in Adelaide, Australia, has told his parents that he used to be Britain's Princess Diana.
What would happen if the world found out that aliens were real?
I didn't say disclosure would be easy, but what is the alternative?
To establish a space force as the 6th branch of the armed forces.
We have so many questions and yet so little time, so to have you here, the pleasure is all mine.
Coming to you from a secret mountain cave, hidden deep within the Idaho wilderness. This is the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
Welcome. Come right in. Have a seat. Pull up a spot and enjoy. I'm Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and you stumbled in to the Dark Wolf's Den. It looks like Jerry's decided to let me host for the rest of this month. Why? Because it's Spooktober, that's why. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, tonight is Spooktober 14th, 2020. And tonight, we're gonna talk about those deep, dark, insidious, wicked, coffin-sleeping, blood-drinking creatures known as the vampire. Were they real? Did they really exist in history? Did they terrorize Europe for many, many years? Or could they still be existing to this day? You just sit right there and curl up, and we're going to discuss vampires, Spooktober 14th, 2020. But first, today in history. On this day, in 1892, Arthur Conan Doyle publishes The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, a collection of 12 stories originally published serially in the Strand magazine. And that is today's Today in History. And we all like to curl up with a good mystery every now and then, don't we? I know I very much do, especially if it's some Sherlock Holmes. What a brilliant mind indeed. Tonight, we're going to be talking about a very mysterious creature indeed. A creature that may have stalked the European countryside in the 1800s or even earlier, perhaps. Yes, that's right. We're talking about that creepy, coffin-sleeping, blood-drinking creature known as the vampire. But where does the vampire get its beginning, right? Where does the vampire start? Where did the legend, where did the myth actually come from? Well, for those who haven't heard yet, there really was a Dracula. That's right, Dracula did actually exist. Before we go any further, I must warn you, though, this episode is not for the faint of heart. If blood and things of that nature being discussed disturbs you, you might want to go somewhere else for this episode. You have been warned.
Today featuring Vlad the Impaler, an inspiration for the legendary vampire Count Dracula, and a voivod with a truly bloody biography. Vlad's father, Vlad, ruled Wallachia as the voivod, which was a prince or duke. Wallachia was at the time under Ottoman imperial control. Vlad was called Dracul, which meant devil or dragon. The title comes from the chivalric Order of the Dragon, which was kind of a who's who of Christian European monarchs of the 1400s, of which Vlad was a member.
So first, we have a dragon's connection here. That's interesting. But what is even more interesting is that it's from a club. The name itself is actually from a group. It has nothing to do with the actual creature person himself. It's just a group that they were a part of, a title, if you will.
Dracula means son of the devil or dragon. When young Vlad was just 11, he was taken hostage by the Ottoman Empire with his father and brother Radu. His father was released, but the other two remained in captivity for 7 years, learning much about their enemy. Near the end of this time, Dracula's father, who was at war with Hungary, was betrayed by the boyars, the aristocracy, and killed. The Ottoman Empire decided to send Vlad to his homeland to take the throne. The Hungarians were against this, though, and after just 2 months, Dracula fled to Moldavia, and his second cousin Vladislav then reigned.
So he didn't immediately take the throne. Oh, but there's going to be a price to pay for that.
After 7 years of that, those same Hungarians felt Vladislav was getting too friendly with the Ottomans, whose power was growing and who had recently taken Constantinople. So, Vlad got the throne again, and this time, he was not going to give it up, and it was time for revenge.
Once again, I must warn you that this gets very, very disturbing.
The Easter feast from 1457 is like something straight out of Game of Thrones. Dracula invited 500 boyars to that feast, seized them, and had them impaled. You are still alive when you're impaled.
To impale someone is to stick a spike of wood through their entire body and allow them to hang there in whatever conscious state they may be in until the end comes.
For a while. Because of this and his reign of terror, he got the name the Impaler. He also refused to pay taxes to the Sultan, stating that if he has to pay, the Ottoman subjects in his lands must remove their turbans.
Of course, the Ottoman Empire and the peoples in the lands took not kindly to this. However, Vlad had an idea of how to change their minds.
When they refused, Dracula had the turbans nailed to their heads.
What an incredibly awful pain that would be, to have something like that literally nailed into your skull. That would be so incredibly bad. And it's things like this that really scare us in times like these seasons of Halloween and Spooktober. It's those little fears, those little things that we can empathize with that are really kind of the most scariest of them all. Those secret things, those things that are almost unspoken yet still scare us so deeply.
The empire quickly responded. In the spring of 1462, Sultan Mehmed II and 200,000 soldiers attacked Wallachia. Along with Mehmed came Vlad's brother Radu, who had converted to Islam. Dracula lost the battle. He then decided to burn the southern part of his country and poison the wells. He knew the Ottoman army quite well and tried to turn their invasion into a nightmare.
He may have lost the original battle. Oh, but Dracula was a smart one indeed. If he couldn't beat them, he would make it the worst time they had ever experienced, and that he definitely did.
Wallachian guerrillas staged sneak attacks on the enemy. Dracula dressed in Ottoman costume and organized a night attack that set fire to Mehmed's tent. In the morning, the Turks fought each other trying to find the imposter. Still though, they marched on till they reached the capital. There they saw a forest of stakes with 20,000 rotting bodies impaled on them. It was real proof that Dracula was the son of the devil. Mehmed returned to his empire, and Dracula was betrayed by the Hungarians and captured by King Matthias Corvinus.
I would say point for Dracula on that one. He did drive them back home. However,
he spent 14 years in prison before being released on condition that he convert from Orthodox Christianity to Catholicism. Once on the throne again, he remained there for less than a year. One theory says that he was killed by his own men, another that he was killed by an assassin.
And what comes next brings such a fitting karmic irony to this incredibly dark story.
His head was sent to Istanbul, where it was, you guessed it, impaled on a stake.
And yes, once again, that is the real-life Dracula. However, he was not as immortal as the TV shows and media has made him out to be. However, as dark a creature as he was, there's actually become a very rich lore around the vampire. That's right. And a lore that goes back for a very, very long time. This is one of those creatures like the werewolf and like the many others that we've discussed on the show so far that goes across all of these different cultures around the world.
From Dracula to Twilight, vampires have been a pervasive part of our pop culture for decades, and a part of folklore for centuries beyond that. From campfire stories to novels, films, comics, and more, vampires are a staple of the horror genre and have appeared in countless pieces of fiction. Although the image and common traits of vampires have varied and evolved over the years, it's hard to find someone that isn't familiar with at least the usual themes.
And of course, we know the usual themes: the black cape, the long fangs for drinking the blood, the actual drinking of the blood, the classic themes that we would call a vampire. We all know those, right? But over time, these traits have grown as these stories have carried through the cultures and the histories of man.
It is startling to see just how many ancient civilizations possessed folklore of some sort of creature akin to a vampire, from the Persians to the Jews and the Egyptians. The myths surrounding these creatures varied wildly, of course, with some also having traits in common with other horrific creatures, like zombies, but the theme of an undead monster or a spirit drinking the blood of the living pervaded many different cultures.
And we'll get into the actual blood drinking in the second half of the show. But just think about it. Maybe that has to do with the fact that the blood is our life force, right? Perhaps it is the idea that to take on another's blood is to take on the life force of another, to gain the amount of years they would have had. Perhaps that is the actual underlying lore of this myth, if it is a myth.
Some of the myths mention the creature preferring to drink the blood of newborns or of pregnant women, and other myths mention the ability for the creature to change its shape in order to attract or charm their victims.
And this is yet another trait that we find across a lot of these dark creatures of the night, is the ability to shapeshift, to change their form into any other form that they would like. Sometimes it's the form of animals. With vampires, of course, it's the form of bats or wolves originally. That's right, vampires used to turn into wolves. I bet you didn't know that. And of course, we hear of many other creatures that turn into others, like the werewolf from human into wolf also. Or like the skinwalkers, of course, from the Indian lore. From the Native American lore, I should say. They would change into any form that they like. Of course, wolf being a preferred form for a lot of them. Why is all the dark creatures of the night like wolves? Well, we are the dark wolf, aren't we?
It would be exhaustive to go over all of these myths in details, so instead I'll focus on the European myths that form the main basis for our modern image of a vampire.
And of course, the classic cape-wearing, fang-bearing, blood-drinking, bat-turning vampire that we all think of is, of course, based on the original European lore of vampires. This is where we in the United States get our ideas of the vampire.
In Albanian folklore, the Striga was a vampiric witch that would drain the blood of infants at night before transforming into an insect and flying away.
And here yet once more we have this shape-shifting ability, albeit this time into an insect, which is just as creepy if you ask me, but we have the shape-shifting going on here.
At least several methods of protecting oneself from a Striga existed, including leaving a cross made from pig bones at the entrance of a church on Easter Sunday.
So apparently the cross was in the lore very early on. It's interesting that this cross is made out of pig bones.
In Iceland, they had the myth of the Draugr, an undead creature that retained a physical body and either remained near their burial place to protect their treasures from thieves, or roamed the earth to harass and kill the living, turning them into more Draugr.
And as we know, the common vampire bite will turn another into a vampire if they do not drain them of all their blood first.
If a corpse was suspected to be a Draugr, they would often be decapitated or staked down in their grave to pin them in place.
And once again, we'll get into more of how to take care of a vampire in the second half, as well as the many ways across history that this has been performed.
In more modern Greek folklore, there are the Vrikolakas, which, despite actually meaning werewolves, have more in common with vampires.
Sounds like the Greek has twisted the folklore across both of these eerie, dark creatures of the night.
Like many of these myths, these creatures would have bloated and swollen forms with a purplish complexion. It was believed that one could become a Vrikolakas after death due to a sacrilegious way of life, a burial in unconsecrated ground, excommunication from a church, and other unholy acts.
So it seems that your choices in life would determine whether or not you were cursed to walk the earth as a dead, blood-drinking creature.
Superstition led to many corpses being handled in a way to avoid the possibility of them returning as a Vrikolakas, including burning the corpse upside down, severing the tendons of the knees, beheading, and impaling.
And again, we'll get into more of the real-life stories of those in the second half of the episode.
Of course, Romania had many myths related to vampirism, such as the Moroi and the Strigoi.
And Romania and Transylvania is where we get most of the classic Dracula myths, of course.
The Moroi were thought of as a lesser or weaker form of a Strigoi, but were still dead monsters that rose from the grave to sap energy from the living. Little information is known about the folklore of the Moroi, overshadowed by the more popular Strigoi. Many of the common traits that we associate with vampires can be seen in the Strigoi myths, including blood-sucking, supernatural abilities such as super strength, speed, senses, and shape-shifting, and the concept of putting a stake through their heart to kill them. It was believed that a person could become a Strigoi, either in life or in death, through a number of means, including living a life of sin, committing suicide without being married, being cursed by a witch, or by being the seventh child of the same sex in a family.
And once again, we find curses, and sin, and witchcraft all combined together there as different ways to create a vampire.
Red hair was often seen as a bad sign, and superstition was rampant in the region. In fact, superstition and fear were so widespread throughout parts of Europe during the 18th century that a mass hysteria over vampirism broke out as a frenzy of alleged vampire sightings and attacks were recorded.
Perhaps it wasn't superstition at all. Perhaps there really were vampires that were escaping their graves and tormenting the people of the 1800s in Europe. Or perhaps it was just mass hysteria after all. But then again, in the second half, we're gonna hear from some real life vampires. So who's to say that even then there weren't creatures of the night that did exist that may very well have been terrorizing this little town? Or perhaps it is just as common sense suggests. It is just superstition and mass hysteria.
Many graves were dug up during this time so that the corpses could be examined or staked down, and despite many scholars vehemently reporting that vampires did not exist, there were some that supported the discussion.
It's always good to know that there are open-minded scholars that are not as dogmatic as most. Even today we find that to be the case, don't we? There are most scholars that will hold dogmatically to their beliefs. And then there are those that will truthfully be open-minded about things and look at things in a completely different way. Those willing to have the discussions of the paranormal. Those are my kind of scholars.
The controversy finally stopped when the Empress of Austria sent her personal physician to investigate the situation, leading to her banning the practice of opening graves and desecrating corpses, with other countries following. Despite this, of course, superstition continued to exist regarding vampires.
Or perhaps they finally staked all the vampires.
And that brings us to the most influential piece of vampiric literature in history, Dracula, and its writer Bram Stoker. The novel was published in 1897, and invasion literature was highly popular among fans of British fiction, which was the concept of Britain being invaded by outside forces, often fantastical. Stoker spent 7 years researching stories and folklore related to vampires throughout Europe, incorporating various myths into his concept of a vampire, but also took inspiration from his friend, actor Sir Henry Irving, to give Dracula a gentlemanly flair. Some believe that Stoker based Dracula on Vlad III, also known as Vlad the Impaler, a ruler of the Wallachia region of Romania during the 1400s.
And of course we briefly touched on Vlad the Impaler's story earlier in the episode.
Stoker took the name Dracula for his book, but apparently knew little about Vlad III, and it's unlikely he based the character off of him, although there are similarities. Count Dracula from the novel, of course, exhibits many of the traits that we associate with classic vampires, including shape-shifting into bats, wolves, or mist, the strength of 20 men, has no reflection in a mirror and casts no shadow, has powerful hypnotic abilities, is largely immortal, and possesses weaknesses to sunlight, garlic, religious symbols, and running water. Of course, Dracula also possesses the ability to bite an individual in order to turn them also into a vampire, albeit one largely under his control. The location of Count Dracula's castle in Transylvania forever linked the region with vampirism in modern fiction. The book was not a massive success upon release, but was praised by critics at the time, and Stoker died a poor man. Although Dracula was not the first novel to feature vampires, it would go on to become the most well-known, largely due to cinema. Dracula has been featured in more films than almost any other character, except for Sherlock Holmes, and this began in 1922 with a silent film known as Nosferatu, directed by F.W. Murnau. Nosferatu was a German production and changed the setting of London from the novel to Germany, among other changes. Due to the company not able to get the film rights, they changed Dracula's name to Count Orlok, and adjusted other elements of the plot and character names. Despite these changes, Stoker's widow sued the company for copyright infringement, and won the case, bankrupting the company. The court ordered the destruction of all copies of Nosferatu, but some survived the process, allowing the film to become a legend of horror cinema.
And of course, today, to curl up with a good version of Nosferatu on a dark, stormy night is what we consider fun, right? As you remember the episode that AJ did earlier this week on horror movies, right? And these were the classic horror movies.
Even more well-known than Nosferatu, however, was the official 1931 production of Dracula, based on a stage play from 1924 that adapted the novel. This time, the production legally obtained the film rights from the Stoker estate and set out to capitalize on the highly successful Broadway play. Hungarian actor Bela Lugosi was finally cast as Count Dracula, although he was not Universal Studios' first choice for the role. Lugosi had already been performing the role of Dracula for the play to critical acclaim, and he lobbied hard and took a low paycheck in order to win the role. The production was allegedly disorganized, but proved mostly a critical success due to the creepy atmosphere and Lugosi's acting.
And of course today, that is a true cult classic version of Dracula. A film that I've seen quite a few times in its black and white form. It's definitely one that I like to curl up with on a dark night in the den. But ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and take a network break right here. We're at the bottom of the first hour, and we'll be back with the second half of this creeptastically spooktober episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show, and more about vampires and even real-life vampires coming up in just a few minutes. So you stay right there and we'll be right back after these messages. Don't you touch that dial.
We gotta stoke the fires and run off the men in black. Don't touch that dial. We'll be right back.
Sex in the city? Nope. Interview with a vampire? Nope. If you build it, they will come? Febreze? Tweeze in the middle? Wrong again. Depends. Nope. Welcome to the Twilight Zone, my friends. A phenomenon known as the Mandela Effect. You may have heard of it. You may want to not neglect unbecoming, awake, and spiritually inclined. So sit back, relax, while I blow your mind. Take the thumb off the cell, stop following the sheep. Down the rabbit hole we go. Are you ready for that leap? The Zapruder film, #JFK. I looked at the footage and I said, what the heck? How come there are 6 people in that dang car? Stretch limo, for me, this was all too bizarre. A glass behind the driver, no way, Jose. I remember before in the car, my mind was in total disarray. trying to make sense of what I was seeing, what I was witnessing. Didn't connect with my inner being. A second woman in the car for me was only the first lady. Do you smell what the rock is cooking? All this seemed kinda shady. Berenstein Bears. Nope. Shazam? Sinbad? Not in this reality. Good lord. An awakening. Was it all a revelation? The naysayers and skeptics call it confabulation. They say you misremembered and call us bat crazy. Did you smoke a do? Maybe that's why it's a little bit hazy. Unless you experience it, you'll never know. But enough of that. On with this Mandela effect flow. Mandela effect in the house. What in the world happened to Ed McMahon? In this reality, Publishers Clearinghouse was not a fan. Never the spokesperson, but we remember it clear as day. McMahon holding that check while the winner yelled out, "Yay!" American Family Publishers, never heard of them until now. This Mandela effect has me raising the people's eyebrow. So many theories on what it could be. Have you ever heard of CERN and the LHC? Luke, I am your father. Nope. Sally Fields? Nope, wrong again. That stands for the Large Hadron Collider. I thought I would mention. You know, the machine that opens up portals into different dimensions? You're probably thinking that this is all science fiction, but you gotta think outside the box and have no restrictions. Alternate realities and parallel dimensions. Okay, I get some of your apprehensions. Could this all be a spiritual evolution? Cause the human race has grown tired of this toxic pollution. Mandela effect in the house. No, I'm not going crazy. Some people, they just don't understand. That's just the way it is. You know? Stay strong, my friends. That's just the way it is. Dolly has no braces? Are you serious? Good lord. Joel Osteen. So what the heck happened to the owl? Oh my gosh. Oh, this is definitely the Twilight Zone. This is crazy.
Oh yeah, this is truly crazy. The crazy month of Spooktober. It's here. Right here on the ripinrabbithole.com. If you're enjoying tonight's look of Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den show with a look at vampires, please make sure to thumb up that video, hit that subscribe button, and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, bringing you the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Jerry Hicks and the Dark Wolf's Den will return again tomorrow night with his new night on a Thursday night of the Dark Wolf's Den show. That's right, Jerry kicks off the weekends both Wednesday and Thursday nights now. Join him tomorrow starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central as the Dark Wolf Den show. Howls at Dark Fairy Tales. It's going to be a fun evening as Spooktober continues. Right here on the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. Then I'll return October 16th, Friday night, my father's birthday, for a look at haunted hotels. Then Saturday, October 17th, we'll explore the rabbit hole of graveyards together. And then Sunday, the 19th, we'll end it out with a journey into the woods. A fantastic lineup as the weekend of rabbit holes continue to twist all the way through to Sunday night. All shows start at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. Make sure to mark your calendars, be here or be square. As October makes its way on towards the end of the month, of course, Halloween, October 31st, our special tribute to the late great Art Bell with Ghost to Ghost. We're going to do a full night of open lines and some of the scariest ghost stories you've ever heard. Halloween night, Saturday, October 31st, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to Ghost Halloween night. So if you have a ghost story, something that you'd like to share with us on air that night, get it ready. Start preparing exactly how you're going to tell it. I'll find all the background music, and it's going to be fun and spooky Halloween night as we end out October together. Maybe Jerry Hicks will be available that night. I don't know. Maybe he and I could do a co-hosted live Ghost to Ghost. How about that? Put a 1 in the chat room if you'd like to see that happen. Speaking of Jerry and the Dark Wolf's Den Show, we're going to return back now to vampires this Wednesday, October 14th, 2020, as the Dark Wolf's Den Show and Jerry Hicks howls at vampires. Stick around, a lot more to come. Are you ready for the ultimate Halloween experience? This year, with all the social distancing taking place, Halloween, contrary to popular belief, has not been canceled. I repeat, Halloween has not been canceled. The Ripon Rabbit Hole is proud to sponsor a unique virtual Halloween event taking place October 15th through the 31st exclusively at ourtrickortreat.com. That's O-U-R, trickortreat.com. Sign up and knock on virtual doors for 17 days straight to win a variety of prizes from national, state, and local sponsors. Check out ourtrickortreat.com for the ultimate Halloween experience this year.
If you were meant to be controlled, you would have come with a remote, but you didn't. And that's why you listen to the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Now, here is your host, Jerry Hicks.
That's right, I am Jerry Hicks, also known as the Dark Wolf, and welcome back to the second half of the Dark Wolf's Den Show. Whether you're on the edge of reality, the edge of the galaxy, the edge of your seat, or anywhere in between, we're glad you chose us to be right there with you. Tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we're talking about those creepy, crawly creatures called vampires. That's right, those dirty, blood-sucking animals. And, you know, we've heard in the first half a lot of folklore, a lot of mythology surrounding these creatures of the night. But in the second half, we're going to look at the real creatures that call themselves vampires. That's right, there are those out there that walk the streets today that claim to be real-life vampires.
My name is Balthazar Shani-san. Most of my friends call me Czar. Hey guys. 54 years old. Been drinking blood since I was 11. And sanguine vampire. Good, how are you?
This man has been drinking blood and living as a vampire since the age of 11 years old. That's pretty young to start doing something like that.
At 11 years old, things started changing for me. I was short, round, and always sickly. And one of my uncles that was big and tall and strong was picking on us, me and my sister. And something snapped. And I went charging. And he was bigger and stronger, and he pinned my arms down to my side. And then I just kind of reared my head back and bit him. He was wearing a coat. I bit through the coat, through his shirt, and into his flesh enough that I could actually taste blood. Like lots of blood. Once that blood hit my tongue, it was like I suddenly came alive.
And this is a ritual that I will never understand. That is, of course, the blood drinking ritual.
Do I really need the blood? I do. And I've gone without for lengths of time just to see what would happen. I'm the kind of person that it physically shows on.
The body has grown a dependence upon the blood itself and having it brought into it. It's just like an alcoholic or any person on drugs. They have that need, that want, that have to having. And we've known people, of course, I'm sure in our lives, who have had problems with alcohol. And when they don't have it, it clearly shows in their personality and the way their body reacts, like shakes and different things like that. It's interesting that these same effects would occur to the blood drinkers when they don't get their blood.
My skin will get ashy, my eyes will be dull and glazed. It literally physically shows on me.
So tell us, Balthazar the vampire, I do have a question. We've seen in the movies and in the folklore that garlic will really bother a vampire. A pizza restaurant, I assume, is not your favorite place. Or the crosses, do they burn you to look at? Tell me about the misconceptions and what we've got wrong about modern-day vampires.
So, what are some of the common misconceptions? How about holy water gets me wet, garlic tastes good on pizza, stick a stake through anything's heart and it will die?
Okay, fair enough, I'll give you that. You stick a stake in anything's hot and it should die. But I do wonder, do you sleep in a coffin? Do you have the dark coffin that you lay down and rest in every day and come out at night?
I do not sleep in a coffin. I have a king-size bed, thank you very much.
I didn't know you could fit a king-size bed into a coffin. And I do, of course, kid. But tell us, Balthazar, about the most common and well-known ritual of vampires, the blood drinking.
I use a clean technique. I'll clean the area on the donor.
I'm curious, would any of you be a donor to a modern-day vampire? Would you volunteer to let a vampire drink from your blood? I gotta say, I don't know if that would be a good idea for me. The werewolf blood might bother the vampires, right? I doubt that I know I would not put myself up as a donor. But would you donate your body for a vampire to drink the blood from? I'm curious.
Honestly, alcohol swabs always leave a funny taste afterwards. I make sure that the blade is new every time. You ready?
Ready.
More often than not, I'll use the back side of the shoulders. I poke a series of holes, and those holes actually provide me enough. Here we go. You ready?
Yeah.
That's not bad. Sweeter taste. Even getting fatty acids again.
Oh, that's good.
I can tell when people are a little bit low on their magnesium and potassium. I can tell when they're not getting enough fatty acids. And because of the flow, I can also tell if they're not drinking enough.
Once again, would you be a donor for the vampires? This wolf would not. That is not up my alley at all. And just in case drinking blood sounds like it might be up your alley, just a fair precaution before you go down that road.
Is it safe to drink blood? With so much interest in vampires these days, you may be wondering, can humans safely drink blood? It's okay to drink a little blood. I'm talking just a few teaspoons, if the blood doesn't have any pathogens, such as blood-borne diseases. But if you drink too much, you could be in trouble. Blood is rich in iron, and because the human body has difficulty excreting excess iron, drinking too much blood can be toxic. That's not to say we don't need iron. It's an important part of hemoglobin, which helps red blood cells deliver oxygen from the lungs to the rest of the body.
And I guess it's just like most other things in life. Moderation is the key.
But too much iron can lead to an iron overdose. There's even an inherited condition known as hemochromatosis, which causes the body to absorb more iron from food than usual. This iron slowly builds up in the body and can damage a person's tissues and organs, especially the liver. It can even lead to death. Luckily, hemochromatosis is manageable if it's caught early. People with the condition simply have to donate blood, which helps offload extra iron.
Well, as good as it is that there is a cure of some type for people like that, I'm not a big fan of needles and donating blood, so that would not be a good thing for this wolf.
Unlike humans, some animals can digest blood without getting iron poisoning. The vampire bat needs a huge amount of iron for its own blood, and then it's able to secrete the excess. But because humans are not vampire bats, drinking too much blood is a bad idea because we didn't evolve to have iron extracting mechanisms in our bodies. Drinking blood, just another one of life's little mysteries.
A mystery indeed. To me, it's a mystery why anybody would want to drink of the blood of another. I know some find it entertaining and others find it very enhancing in one way or another. But I had an incident when I was younger. I had a surgery in my mouth, on some of my teeth, and I ended up swallowing what I thought was spit for a long time, like a couple of hours. A little while later, my stomach hurt very, very badly, and I ended up having to, how do I put this in a nice way, retrieve from my stomach what I had been swallowing. And when it came out, it was red, and I knew what had happened. I had been swallowing blood that I thought was spit. Of course, that set my stomach in a very bad position, so I could only imagine drinking blood on a normal basis. My stomach would be turned so badly. And I would advise against anybody practicing that, my personal self. Now, if you want to, that's up to you, but I would definitely personally advise against drinking blood if I were you. Not to count the amount of blood-borne pathogens and diseases nowadays. Definitely not something that I would want to take the risk on. What about you? But you know, it just takes a little common sense, right? Vampires, yes, there are real vampires that walk the earth. They don't transform into wolves and bats like the olden vampires, at least not to the best of my knowledge. But with a little common sense, we can see that there are just people on this earth that practice the old vampiric traditions, and whether it's a curse or a blessing, in the end, ladies and gentlemen, you be the judge. Ooh, yeah. We gots to close it out. That's right. That's it for this episode of the Dark Wolf's Den Show for Wednesday, Spooktober 14th, 2020. I hope everybody's enjoyed this little romp through the wild world of vampires. But don't you worry, this episode may be over, but we now have Wednesday and Thursday nights on the Ripon Rabbit Hole. That's right. We will be back on the air again tomorrow night, talking about dark fairy tales. That's right. What are the origins of the fairy tales that you grew up with? Or perhaps even the nursery rhymes. We'll find out how dark these origins really are. Then on Friday night, AJ the Rippin' Rabbit will be back with a Rippin' Rabbit Hole live show. That's right. You guys make sure to come back 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central on Friday for Haunted Hotels. Could you imagine getting a hotel room that's already taken by a spirit? I wonder how much they like sharing their places of haunt. I've heard some crazy stories from these places, and hopefully we'll hear even more Friday night from AJ when he talks about haunted hotels. Then on Saturday night, graveyards. Did you ever do rituals in a graveyard? Maybe play games as a kid? They're such a creepy place. And we'll find out just how creepy they are on Saturday night. Then on Sunday, into the woods. One of my favorite places. What kind of creepiness lies in the woods? What kind of things has man not yet figured out that are hiding and lurking in those wooded areas? AJ will discuss that on Sunday night, and that will close out this Spooktober weekend of topics. May I highly suggest to you that you go over to the ripinrabbithole.com. That is RIPONRABBITHOLE.com. That's my favorite hangout over there. Over there you're going to find the 24/7 Backstage Lounge. That's right. Scroll about halfway down that page and select the VIP entrance. You're going to have to select your microphone and camera, but you can turn that off the moment you get inside. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it for me tonight. I hope everybody's enjoyed this amazing episode of creepiness and bats and vampires. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Until next time, and on behalf of AJ the Rippin' Rabbit and everybody involved with making this show the amazing hit that it is, we thank you so very much. And on behalf of Rippin' Common Sense Radio, we thank you for being here. And remember always, stay awake, but dare to dream. Good night, everybody.
And that famous howl is a signature on the Animals of Radio, and it means you started your weekend right. Give yourselves a round of applause for being smart enough to be here. Hi, everyone. It's AJ, the Rippin' Rabbit. Did you enjoy Jerry's look at vampires on the Dark Wolf Den show tonight? If you have, and you haven't done so already, please make sure to thumb up that video. Hit that subscribe button and ring that bell. You'll get our notifications every time we go live. We're here every Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights, bringing you the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. Jerry Hicks will return again tomorrow night with a look at dark fairy tales. Should be an intriguing Thursday night. Then I'll return Friday night with a look at haunted hotels. We're going to look at all the spooky stories of haunted hotels all across the world. Then Saturday, dive down the rabbit hole of graveyards. It's going to be a fun look at graveyards and cemeteries. And then Sunday night, we'll enter the woods together and end the weekend out right. As Spooktober continues right here on the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Rippin' Rabbit Hole. It's going to be a lot of fun. And then October 31st, we're going to end out Spooktober together. Halloween night, Saturday, October 31st, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, with an honor to Art Bell. In a yearly tradition, we are going to carry forward Ghost to Ghost. We're going to do a full night of open lines with your ghost stories. Get ready for the scariest night in radio, October 31st, 2020, starting at 7 p.m. Pacific, 10/9 Central, as we take on Ghost to Ghost. to complete and round out a full month of Spooktober right here on the very best of Common Sense Radio, the Ripon Rabbit Hole. I like Spooktober. I really do. I'm looking forward to November, though. It's going to be a complete theme change as we move on into Christmas. I'm going to head on over to the Backstage VIP Lounge at the RiponRabbitHole.com and join Jerry Hicks and all of you there, because for many of you, the conversation ends here. But for the Ripon Rabbits, it's just beginning, where the conversation continues in the 24/7 VIP chat lounge at RiponRabbitHole.com. Are you ready for the ultimate Halloween experience? This year, with all the social distancing taking place, Halloween, contrary to popular belief, has not been canceled. I repeat, Halloween has not been canceled. The Ripon Rabbit Hole is proud to sponsor a unique virtual Halloween event taking place October 15th through the 31st exclusively at ourtrickortreat.com. That's O-U-R, trickortreat.com. Sign up and knock on virtual doors for 17 days straight to win a variety of prizes from national, state, and local sponsors. Check out ourtrickortreat.com for the ultimate Halloween experience this year.
Unlocked and into the dark. Some things are better left unknown. And I'll never find you here, 'cause no one's ever Oh, what a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. Oh, what a sinner. Is it in her? What's the truth in this riddle? Is love really just this simple? I can't seem to find my way in this world that never stays. What a widow, a peaceful spider. When the glass is clean, she's a sneaky hider. Hide the lies and the alibis. What a sinner. Is it in her? Just illusion, manifestation, or